2 kilometers underground. Rock so hard it destroys industrial cutting tools in hours. Explosions of stone that erupt from solid walls without warning, with enough force to kill a person instantly. Floods that dump 20,000 cubic meters of water into a tunnel in a single day, with almost no warning. This isn't a disaster movie. This is a real construction site in central China, and the reason engineers put themselves through this nightmare wasn't gold, or oil, or a subway line. It was water. 14 million people were running out of it. And the only way to save them was to drill straight through one of the most dangerous mountain ranges on the planet. This is the story of the Qinling Water Diversion Tunnel, arguably the most punishing tunnel ever built by human beings, and the lengths China went to just to keep the taps running in one of its driest regions. To understand why anyone would attempt this, you need to understand China's fundamental geographic curse. The south of the country has abundant water. The Yangtze River Basin alone carries a huge share of China's fresh water. The north, including the flat, densely populated Guangdong Plain in Shanxi Province, has the people, the farmland, and the industry, but chronically not enough water to support them. This imbalance isn't new. Mao Zedong reportedly first floated the idea of moving water from south to north back in 1952. Decades later, China finally built the answer at a national scale, the South to North Water Transfer Project, the largest water diversion scheme ever attempted by any country, moving tens of billions of cubic meters of water annually from the Yangtze Basin toward the parched north, stabilizing groundwater beneath Beijing that had been sinking for years under the strain of overuse. But Beijing wasn't the only city with this problem. In Shanxi Province, the region around Xi'an, home to more than 14 million people, needed its own solution. The water it needed was sitting right there, in the Han River, just on the other side of a mountain range. The problem was the mountain range. The Qinling Mountains aren't just tall. They're one of the most geologically hostile places you could choose to build anything, let alone drill a hole 98 kilometers long straight through the middle of them. The plan: connect the Han River, a major tributary of the Yangtze, to the Wei River, a tributary of the Yellow River, by tunneling directly beneath the Qinling Range, crossing the actual geological boundary between two of China's largest river systems. At its deepest point, this tunnel sits over 2,000 meters below the surface. That's deeper than almost any comparable tunnel ever excavated for water transport anywhere on Earth. And at that depth, the rock isn't just hard, it's under immense pressure from the sheer weight of the mountains sitting on top of it. The rock itself is a brutal mix of quartzite, granite, and diorite, some of the toughest stone types found in nature. Engineers measured its average compressive strength at 194 megapascals, with peaks up to 316 megapascals. To put that in perspective, that's roughly comparable to the crushing strength of high-grade concrete, except this wasn't poured by humans. It's been compressing naturally for hundreds of millions of years, and tunneling machines had to fight through solid walls of it, meter by meter, for nearly a decade. Here's where the story turns genuinely dangerous, in a way most infrastructure videos never get to talk about. When you drill deep enough into rock under enough pressure, something called a rock burst can happen. The rock isn't just hard, it's storing enormous amounts of built-up mechanical stress, like a compressed spring. When a tunnel-boring machine cuts into it and releases that pressure, the rock can fail violently and explosively, sending fragments flying at high speed directly into the tunnel, sometimes carving craters more than 10 meters deep into the tunnel wall in an instant. This wasn't a rare event on this project. Peer-reviewed engineering studies on the Qinling Tunnel describe rock bursts as a frequent, recurring hazard throughout construction. Serious enough that a dedicated body of published research exists purely on how to predict and survive them here. To protect the crews, engineers deployed microseismic monitoring systems. Arrays of sensors listening for the subtle acoustic signatures rock makes right before it fails, giving workers precious seconds or minutes of warning before a burst. Where the danger was highest, teams installed flexible steel support systems, engineered specifically to absorb and disperse the shock of a rock burst rather than resist it head-on, since rigid supports would simply shatter under the impact. And rock bursts weren't even the only hazard. According to the tunnel boring machine manufacturer's own engineering records, crews encountered 69 separate major water ingress events during construction, sudden floods bursting through fractured granite. On at least one occasion, a single breach dumped more than 20,000 cubic meters of water into the tunnel in a single day from one point alone. Crews had to install pumping systems powerful enough to remove tens of thousands of cubic meters of water daily just to keep the excavation from flooding out entirely. Imagine going to work every day in these conditions. 2 kilometers of solid rock above your head. Temperatures inside sections of the tunnel reportedly climbing toward 40 degrees Celsius, combined with punishing humidity, turning routine physical labor into something closer to working inside a sauna while operating heavy machinery. The constant, uncomfortable awareness that the wall next to you could, without warning, release years of stored geological pressure in a fraction of a second. Crews use 2 different excavation methods depending on the terrain. Traditional drill and blast techniques for over 60 kilometers of the route, and massive 8-meter diameter tunnel boring machines for the remaining stretch. Enormous rotating cutter heads grinding directly through the granite, millimeter by millimeter, for years at a time. This is the side of Chinese megaprojects that rarely makes it into a highlight reel. Not a sweeping drone shot of a finished bridge at sunset, but a decade of engineers and workers fighting, meter by meter, against a mountain that was actively trying to kill them. So, after all of that, the rock bursts, the floods, the heat, the nearly decade-long construction timeline, did it actually work? The tunnel is now complete, successfully connecting the Han River to the Wei River beneath the Qinling Range. Water from the Yangtze's tributary system now flows through this tunnel to relieve water stress in the Guangdong region, supporting a population estimated at over 14 million people across central Shaanxi province. For context on what that actually means day to day, a functioning water supply isn't a luxury upgrade for a region like this. It's the difference between farmland that produces food and farmland that doesn't. Between a city that can keep growing its economy and one that has to ration water during dry seasons. Whatever this tunnel cost, in money, in danger, in nearly 10 years of extraordinarily difficult labor, the alternative was a slow-motion water crisis for one of China's most historically significant regions, the ancient heartland surrounding Xi'an. If you've been following this channel, you're starting to notice something. We've now covered China solving 3 completely different versions of the same underlying problem. Geography getting in the way of where people actually need to live and work. The Shenzhen-Zhongshan link solved a problem of speed, squeezing more economic efficiency out of an already wealthy coastal region. The Huajiang Grand Canyon Bridge solved a problem of isolation, connecting communities that poverty and terrain had cut off from opportunity. And the Qinling Tunnel solves a problem of scarcity, moving a resource from where nature put it to where 14 million people actually need it to survive. 3 different problems. 3 wildly different engineering solutions. But the same underlying philosophy running through all of them. Geography is not a fixed constraint. It's an obstacle to be engineered around. No matter how extreme the terrain, how remote the location, or how dangerous the rock 2 kilometers beneath a mountain turns out to be. Now, it's worth being honest about the limits of this story, because not every engineering triumph is free of consequences. Massive water diversion projects like this one reroute a natural resource on a continental scale, and that inevitably creates trade-offs downstream, literally. Diverting water from one river system to feed another can place ecological stress on the river that gave the water up, affecting ecosystems, fish populations, and communities that depended on the original flow. China has had to build additional infrastructure elsewhere, specifically to compensate for exactly this kind of downstream stress created by its other water transfer projects. None of that erases the genuine engineering achievement here. But it's worth remembering that the terraforming water on this scale isn't a free action. Somewhere, something else has to give. A tunnel, 2 kilometers underground, drilled through rock hard enough to destroy machinery, dangerous enough to explode without warning, and wet enough to flood faster than pumps could clear it, all so that 14 million people wouldn't run out of water. That's not a highlight reel mega project. That's one of the most genuinely dangerous construction efforts on Earth, built almost entirely out of sight, underground, where nobody was ever going to see it unless someone told the story.